Not everyone is born to be good. Some people, even when they smile, still bleed on the inside. Tameka Ellis was one of those people. She wasn't born to be loved. She was born to be chosen. Her skin, smooth and golden like honey. Her voice, smoky and low. Her hair, thick curls always pulled to one side, revealing a sharp, elegant shoulder. She walked into a room like the light had to take a step back. Other women envied Tameka because men looked at her like they'd forgotten their wives were standing right beside them. But Tameka didn't need attention. She needed the power that attention brought. Years ago, she chose a man nearly 20 years older than her, Richard Wilson, a white real estate mogul, wealthy, calm, polite to the point of boredom. Men like him didn't make her tremble, but he gave her status, a new last name, a white painted mansion in a neighborhood full of lawyers and dentists. And to Tameka, that was its own kind of victory. Then Richard's younger brother moved in, Eli Wilson. Unlike his brother, Eli lived fast, burned money like paper, and spoke like the world owed him something. He smiled with his eyes, but never with his soul. And Tameka saw something in Eli that Richard didn't have: risk and fire. Her husband gave her everything, but his brother made her want to smash it all. Tameka had never thought of herself as a traitor. But then, one night, walking into the kitchen in a nightgown thin as mist, and Eli was there, still sitting at the table, eyes glued to her like he'd never seen a woman before. She knew the game had begun. At first, it was just glances across the hallway. Then, a few flirtatious remarks over dinner. One night, Richard dozed off on the sofa. Tameka walked past Eli, letting the hem of her dress brush his knee. Eli said nothing. But that night, he left his bedroom door open, just a crack. The first time happened in the garage. Richard was out of town. It was raining. The car hadn't made it inside. Tameka pulled on Eli's jacket and kissed him under the sickly yellow porch light. She pressed him against the wall and whispered, "Don't mistake me for a sweet little housewife. I'm a woman who knows exactly what she wants." Eli didn't question her. He just grabbed her waist, and that's when the foundation of the house started to crack. After that, it happened again and again. Every time Richard left the house, Tameka appeared in Eli's room, barefoot, wearing silk. She wasn't looking for love. She was testing what it felt like to control two men under the same roof. Eli became addicted to her, and she became addicted to the way he looked at her, like she was the one thing he still couldn't completely possess. One evening, as they lay side by side on the Persian rug in the study, their sweat soaking into Richard's expensive carpet, Tameka asked, "You think if Richard died, you'd still get to keep me?" Eli turned away, didn't answer. But later that night, for the first time, he handed her a secondary bank card from his wallet. Tameka knew she was drifting into the gray. She was still Richard's legal wife. But now, she held Eli's banking schedule. She knew both of their safe codes. And more importantly, she was standing in the middle. And she liked it. She started imagining a life without Richard. No more polite dinners. No more on-time birthday flowers. Just Eli, money, wine, and freedom. A thought flickered in her mind, small at first. If Richard disappeared, but then the thought took shape. It became sharper. It started forming into a plan. Tameka always believed that death wasn't the worst thing. Losing control was. And for Richard, her good, almost too good husband, the one thing he couldn't endure was being publicly embarrassed. Not beaten, not betrayed, but pulled over, searched, treated like a criminal. That, to Richard, was worse than infidelity. And Tameka knew that, all too well. She planned it over 2 weeks. No rush, no mistakes. Every step measured in heartbeats and in smiles. She met Troy, a low-tier drug runner who used to date her best friend. He lived in a moldy apartment on the east side, where the hallway lights always flickered and the carpet smelled like mildew and sweat. Troy didn't ask questions. He handed her a small, silver-wrapped zip bag, unmarked, vacuum-sealed. Inside, for grams of heroin laced with fentanyl, just enough to make any traffic stop escalate into a felony. "Just put it in the right place," Troy said. "They'll handle the rest." That afternoon, She came home early, knowing Richard was upstairs on a Zoom call. The black Mercedes sat gleaming in the garage, clean, locked, but with the key fob always left on the shoe shelf. Tameka opened the door and stepped inside like she was climbing onto a throne. She opened the glove compartment, neat, organized, full of chargers, gum, and a tiny bottle of seat spray. She slid her hand beneath the bottom layer, tucked the silver bag deep beneath the paperwork, and flattened everything back down like nothing had been touched. The entire process took 43 seconds. No more, no less. She closed the compartment, stepped out, and stood in the center of the garage for a moment, inhaling the metallic cold. For the first time in her life, she realized she could destroy a man with nothing but silence. The next morning, she let Richard leave first. 45 minutes later, she parked outside a car wash and dialed 911 from an unregistered burner phone. Her voice was soft, just scared enough. "I don't know the guy. I'm just a passerby. But there's a white man driving a black Mercedes, plate 4XJ. I saw him stash something shiny under the seat. Looked like foil. Like drugs. I'm just worried, that's all." That night, Richard called her at 8:42 p.m. His voice shook. They found something in my car. Heroin. I've never touched anything like that. You believe me, right? She kept her rhythm. "Oh my God. No way. Do you want me to call the lawyer?" She hung up, stood in the kitchen, phone still in hand, the soft lighting casting sharp edges across the marble counter. She didn't cry, didn't flinch, just poured a glass of wine. Eli walked in, shirtless, hair wet, towel over his shoulder. "Good news?" he asked. She nodded slightly. "Your brother's out of the game." 3 days after Richard's arrest, Tameka stood in the living room with a champagne flute, gazing out at the pool. She wasn't wearing black. She didn't fake grief. Instead, she wore a pale gold silk dress, her hair pinned up, makeup just seductive enough to be noticed but never questioned. She looked like a woman who had just begun a new life. Eli was at the kitchen bar, feet up on a stool, scrolling the news on his phone. They're saying Richard could face up to 10 years. But if he pleads out, maybe 6. Could be out even sooner. Tameka turned her head, lips curling ever so slightly. 6 years is enough time to live an entire life. And she meant it. She truly believed everything had fallen into place. Richard, erased. Eli, younger, wild, easier to control. And above all, the money. The house. The company's shares. The yacht she helped choose the paint for. Everything. Then the phone rang. Richard's private attorney, Mr. Jenkins. His voice was hoarse, polite to the point of being clinical. "Ms. Ellis, I need to see you. There are a few items to clarify before assets go into freeze." She showed up at Jenkins' office in a dark blazer, blood-red lipstick, and the eyes of someone who believed she'd already won. Inside the conference room, Jenkins laid out a file folder and opened to the first page. Richard's will, last updated 3 months before he married Tameka. As per the current terms, Jenkins said, if Mr. Wilson is detained or becomes incapacitated, temporary asset control is transferred to the next legal heir listed in the document, namely, Eli Wilson. Tameka blinked. "You mean, I'm not on it?" Jenkins looked up. "No, ma'am. Richard never revised the will after your marriage. You're not a legal beneficiary." She walked out of the office with her heels striking hard against the polished floor. Each step landed like a curse. She got in the car, slammed the door shut, and punched the steering wheel. I took down a man for a name that wasn't even on the paper. That night, she cooked dinner for Eli, spaghetti and red wine. She poured his glass, poured hers, let the candlelight dance in silence. Eli talked about a new car, a condo by the waterfront. He spoke like the world had just begun again. Without her, Tameka sat there, smiling just enough while her insides went cold, like melting ice in the bottom of her wine glass. He didn't love me. He was waiting for me to do the dirty work. Eli changed. Not suddenly, not obviously, but like the light fading across a row of houses at dusk. A little less each day. He no longer called during work. No longer slipped into Tameka's room at night. no longer smiled with that lazy, hungry look in his eyes. Tameka noticed in the smallest things. The untouched glass of wine. Text left on read. One night, he came home late, his shirt faintly scented with perfume that wasn't hers. When she asked, he said, "Had a meeting. You're being paranoid again." She started watching. Every time he left the house, she stood on the upstairs balcony, watching his car disappear around the bend. Once, she hired a private investigator. An old man, cheap, used to be a supermarket security guard. 3 days later, he handed her a stack of photos. Eli at a bar, his hand resting on a brunette's thigh. Eli leaving a hotel at 2 a.m. Eli exchanging cash at an unlicensed pawn shop. Tameka flipped through each photo like they were paper cuts against her skin. No pain, but every one left a scar. That night, she confronted him at dinner. The candlelight flickered, same as it had the first night they slept together. She asked, "Are you hiding something?" Eli looked up. His eyes were cold as crushed ice. "You really think you're the only one who knows how to keep secrets?" For the first time, Tameka had nothing to say, and that's when she realized the game was no longer hers. Tameka began watching Eli like he was a stranger who happened to live in her house. She noticed every detail. He always checked his phone in the bathroom. His face darkened after each call, like something was pressing on the back of his neck. He avoided private numbers, kept notifications off, and never let the screen face up. One night, while he was passed out on the sofa, Tameka picked up his phone. The passcode was still his mother's birthday. He never thought she'd check. In just a few minutes, she found an overdraft alert from his bank, a text from someone named Derek demanding $25,000 by the end of the week, no excuses. A photo of Eli handing over what looked like Richard's property documents to a man with sunglasses and tattoos. Tameka tossed the phone onto the table. She didn't cry. She just thought, this isn't about love. I wasn't betrayed like a lover. I was used like a pawn. The next day, she rehired the same cheap detective she'd used before. I want it all. His debts, his accounts, who he owes, and how much. 3 days later, the report came in. Eli owed over $180,000. 6 creditors, including high-risk loan sharks, flagged as high risk by 2 major banks, had been threatened with physical harm for non-payment, was actively trying to siphon money from Richard's company, the same company Tameka once believed would be hers. She sat in the car, gripping the folder so tightly the corners buckled. Her thoughts were sharp. I wasn't a wife. I wasn't a lover. I was bait, the thing he used to line everything up. That night, Eli came home late. He took off his jacket, opened a bottle of wine, and said casually, "Richard had a court date today. Bet he's losing his mind. Guys like him don't survive that kind of embarrassment." Tameka sat at the table, staring at him. Her voice came out calm. "And you're still drinking wine, paid for with the money of the man you betrayed." Eli paused for a second, then smirked. "Let's not pretend I forced you to do anything. You made your choice, Tameka." And that's when something inside her cracked. No sound, no blood, just a fracture, deep and quiet. Eli didn't throw Tameka out. He simply made sure she no longer belonged. It started small. Her shared bank card stopped working. He said it was a system glitch. She checked. Her access had been revoked. Her car keys were replaced. The new set was missing the garage pass. Invites to dinners, events, weekends with his circle. Her name was never on the list. One evening, she opened the wine cabinet. Empty. All the bottles she had chosen were gone, replaced by cheap brands she didn't recognize. She asked the housekeeper, just a shrug in return. No one looked at her like the lady of the house anymore. Then Eli came home with someone else. No explanation. No shame. They ate dinner in the living room. Loud laughter. The girl was blonde, younger, wearing Eli's shirt. Tameka passed by. Silence. Then more laughter, as if she weren't there at all. She moved into the guest room. 3 days later, the bed was removed. She slept on the sofa, under a worn blanket, beneath a flickering light that felt like a reminder of everything she had once owned, now quietly erased. A week later, She opened the filing cabinet. Nothing. Marriage certificate gone. House papers gone. Company documents gone. Eli didn't say a word, but his eyes made it clear. This had all been decided long ago. Tameka walked out one drizzly morning. No suitcase. No phone. No goodbye. The gates closed behind her like a silent verdict. She sat on a park bench nearby. Hair soaked, dress stained with mud. People walked past. No one stopped. No one saw the woman who once lived. Behind the iron fence in the house with white columns. For the first time in years, Tameka was no one. Her first night with no home to return to. Tameka sat in a 24-hour coffee shop and ordered a plain black coffee. She didn't drink it. She just needed a reason to stay. Under lights, near people, surrounded by the soft clink of spoons against porcelain. Her coat was thin. Wind crept up her sleeves. Shoes dirty. Lips dry. Mascara streaked from the rain. She stared through the window where streetlights smeared across the wet asphalt like blurred memories. At 2 a.m., the cleaning crew started looking at her a little too long. She stood, left without turning back. No one stopped her. No one asked where she was going. She wandered sidewalks, hands in pockets. The neon from a sketchy massage parlor painted her face in red and blue. A man in a car rolled down his window and offered her a ride. She didn't answer, just looked at him, then walked on like he'd never been there. She dozed for a while on a park bench. Not real sleep. It was too cold for that. For those few hours, memories flickered out of order. Richard slumped in a jail cell. Eli kissing her at the bottom of the stairs. Her silk robe slipping onto hardwood. And her own eyes in the mirror. When there was nothing left to hold on to. When the first line of dawn cut across the sky, Tameka opened her eyes. Dirt clung to her sleeves. The wind slapped her cheeks like a warning. She stood, joints stiff and aching, and walked with no destination. But inside her, for the first time in weeks, one thing was clear. She wouldn't cry, and she wouldn't forget. Tameka vanished from the map for a while. No one knew where she was. No friends. No posts. Just a few security cameras catching the outline of a black woman in a faded hoodie, walking into a corner store near midnight to buy instant noodles and a lighter. She rented a tiny room on the south side of the city. 3rd floor. Low ceiling. Jammed window. Wallpaper peeling at the edges. A dried blood stain in the corner of the floor. No one asked her name. She didn't offer it. Rent was paid in cash. Cash she got from pawning the bracelet Eli had once called hers. Every morning, Tameka sat in a cheap diner, pen in hand, notebook open. It wasn't a diary. It wasn't grief. It was a list. Names. Phone numbers. Eli's schedule. Names of people who stood with him. Names of people who turned their backs on her. At night, she studied. She read about unsolved murders. How to plant a GPS under a car without opening it. Which drugs were tasteless, scentless. How to wipe a burner phone clean. She wasn't planning to do anything right away. But she knew, when the time came, there wouldn't be time to hesitate. Once she saw Eli in a video online, standing at some rooftop event, arm around a brunette's waist, smiling like the world owed him nothing. Tameka didn't feel jealousy. She sat still, and inside, something cracked. Not pain. Cold, so cold it couldn't be sealed again. She was no longer the Tameka from 5 years ago. Not the woman tossed out with no suitcase. Now, she was the empty space in the mirror, and that space was waiting to be filled with something else. Eli started to feel something was wrong. Not obvious, not nameable, just a sense that something was behind him. It began with late-night calls. No words, just silence on the line. Once, when he answered, he heard slow, steady breathing, like someone standing close, but choosing not to speak. Another time, he returned to his car in a parking garage. Nothing was stolen, no scratches, but the rearview mirror had been moved, just slightly, as if someone had been inside. Sat there, left a trace, and a scent of perfume he hadn't smelled in months. He went to see a doctor. Blood pressure up. Insomnia. Paranoia. The doctor said, could be work-related stress. But Eli knew, this wasn't work. At parties, he started glancing over his shoulder too often. Always chose the seat facing the door. While driving, he checked his mirrors more than the road ahead. One night, he came home to find the door unlocked. Nothing missing. No signs of forced entry. But the towels in the bathroom were flipped. The wine glass on the table slightly moved. He called the police. They checked. Found nothing. One young officer shrugged. Maybe you forgot to lock it. But Eli never forgot. One afternoon, adjusting his collar in front of a mirror, he saw something move behind him. Quick. No face. Just shadow. And that's when it sank in. He had used Tameka. Broken her. Stepped on her. Left her in the dark. But the dark never stays quiet forever. Tameka wasn't crazy. She hadn't lost control. She didn't scream, didn't break anything. She simply prepared, like someone setting a dinner table for the last guest they would ever invite. 3 months of watching. 2 burner phones. A SIM card registered under a fake name, Vanessa Grant. A Glock 17, bought from a former Marine, missing 2 fingers. He didn't ask questions. No paperwork. She knew Eli had moved into a new condo, 15 minutes from downtown. 8th floor, west-facing window. A hallway camera, but no overnight guard. He lived alone. Sometimes women came and went. But the one thing Eli didn't have was anyone who would miss him if he disappeared. She waited for a cold night, heavy with fog. Thursday. No appointments on his calendar. Tameka wore a gray hoodie, jeans, sneakers. No lipstick. No perfume. Nothing to leave behind but her timing. At 1:26 a.m. She stepped out of a taxi 3 blocks from the building. Left hand, a paper bag with cheap wine. Right hand, in her hoodie pocket, wrapped around something cold and familiar. The hallway on the 8th floor was long and quiet. Wood-paneled, dark carpet, no footsteps. The hallway camera sat opposite Eli's door. She kept her head down, walked close to the wall. The door wasn't locked. Or maybe it had been left open. The living room was dim, lit only by the warm glow from the kitchen. Soft jazz played from a Bluetooth speaker. A bottle of wine sat half-finished on the table. Eli's coat was draped over a chair. Tameka stood still, then stepped forward. Eli was asleep on his side. T-shirt, shorts, hair messy, snoring faintly. A dark red stain on the pillow. Wine spilled earlier, now dried and crusted like old blood. She pulled the Glock, thumbed off the safety. No shaking. Not fast. Not slow. There was no scream. Just the sound of glass shattering. A wine glass knocked off the nightstand. One shot. To the chest. No second needed. She stood there. Watched him for 12 full seconds. No tears. No why. No, was it worth it? She picked up the phone. Called 911. Gave her name. Gave the address. Said what had happened. Then she sat down. Back to the wall. Eyes on the kitchen light. Bouncing off the ceiling like blood spilled from another world. The cops arrived 9 minutes later. She hadn't moved. The gun lay on the floor in front of her. She didn't resist. The case file was open that same night. Police recovered a Glock 17. 1 round fired for remaining. No signs of struggle. No forced entry. No blood on her. Tameka sat silently in the interrogation room like a shadow. She didn't ask for a lawyer. Didn't ask for water. She spoke only 3 sentences. I pulled the trigger. I knew him. I didn't run because I didn't need to. They thought it would be open and shut. A clean kill. Confession. Weapon in hand. No resistance. But one thing kept bothering lead investigator Luis Martinez. Her silence. Women don't usually kill this way. They don't walk into a man's home, fire a single round, call 911, and wait on the floor. This wasn't rage. It wasn't jealousy. It felt more like a ritual. Martinez had his team dig through old files. Public records. Civil reports. Even dusty case notes long since archived. One name came up, Richard Wilson. Her ex-husband. Arrested 3 years earlier for drug possession. Heroin in the trunk of his car. Initial sentence, 8 years. But the case had strange holes. No fingerprints on the package. No clear witness. The whole arrest had started with an anonymous tip. Martinez started connecting the dots. Husband sent to prison. Lover shot dead. Same woman. Same lack of emotion. He asked Tech to recover the call history from the burner phone found in her coat pocket that night. They did. Some of those numbers match calls made to 911 3 years ago. The same tip that took down Richard Wilson. Doubt was gone. She had orchestrated two endings, 3 years apart. One with the law, one with a bullet. The file went to the DA's office. A closed-door meeting happened that Monday, and the question was no longer, did she kill Eli? It became, is this a layered killer? Someone who hides dark motives behind the illusion of justice? Tameka remained silent. In her holding cell, she wrote, not a diary, not a statement, just a single sentence repeated over and over. When they throw you to the bottom, you learn to breathe there. The trial began on a Monday at 9 a.m. No rain, no sun, just a thin veil of fog covering the courthouse steps. As if the verdict already knew. Nothing about this case would be clean. Tameka entered in a gray prison uniform, wrists still marked from the cuffs. She didn't scan the room, didn't search for anyone in the crowd. She sat at the defendant's table like she was returning to a place that had always been waiting for her. The prosecutor, a woman with tight brown hair and a face trained not to flinch, had handled more than a few calculated murders. She didn't waste time. One man was shot once. No second round. One woman called the police, stayed at the scene, confessed. No one disputes the facts. Today, we ask the only question left. Why? Tameka's defense attorney was young. Round glasses, slight hunch. The kind no one bets on, but sometimes they win. He didn't say much. He asked the court to consider her state of mind. Betrayal. Deception. Thrown out of the life she once believed was hers. A woman who once had everything, then nothing, and no one looked back. The court called witnesses. An investigator, a former cellmate, a social worker who met Tameka when she was 19, arrested for shoplifting. Each said something different, but all shared a single truth. She isn't pitiful, but she's not simple either. The prosecution pushed for first-degree murder, maximum sentence, life without parole. The defense asked for a downgrade to second degree. Murder in a state of extreme emotional distress. Without premeditation. Tameka said nothing for 3 days. Until the fourth day, when the judge asked, do you have anything you'd like to say before sentencing? Tameka stood. No paper. No tears. Her voice was hoarse, but steady. I don't want to offend myself. I'm not asking for mercy. I just want to say, sometimes people don't kill to end someone else. They kill to end something inside themselves. The room went quiet. No applause. No tears. Just the hum of the air conditioner in the back. Tameka was sentenced to life in prison without parole. No one gasped. No one clapped. No one objected. She left the courtroom in silence, her feet barely feeling the floor, as if she'd already stepped out of her own body long ago. The women's prison that housed lifers was buried deep in the countryside, 3 hours by bus from the city. No high walls, no stone towers, just rows of box-shaped buildings, electric fencing, and a sky too wide to look at for long. Her cell had a single bed, a sink, a stainless steel toilet, and no mirror. She asked the guard why. He shrugged. Ain't no one here need to see themselves every day. Tameka didn't react. She didn't cry. She didn't keep a journal anymore. She folded paper into boats. One a day, dropped them into the toilet tank, watched them spin until they sank. Breakfast was a hard-boiled egg, dry toast, and coffee that tasted like regret. She didn't complain. She ate slowly, chewing like every bite was a piece of the past she was being forced to swallow. She didn't talk to anyone, didn't fight, didn't try to make friends. One younger inmate, freckled and curious, once asked, "Who were you out there?" Tameka looked at her, didn't smile, didn't answer. She just stood and walked out into the yard, like the question had been a dull blade pressed against her ribs. Not fatal, just bruising. Every day was the same. Wake, eat, yard time, laundry shift, return, sleep. No one called her by name anymore. They called her by number. #6741. No soft mattress. No lingering stares. No memory of being the woman two men had risked names, money, and their lives to keep. Now, she was a shadow, and on sleepless nights, she dreamed of mirrors, of seeing herself. But in the dreams, the mirror was always broken, and her face was gone. One Saturday afternoon, the prison allowed the inmates extra time in the yard. Tameka chose a quiet corner, a patch of sun filtering through the barbed wire fence, laying narrow strips of light across the concrete. She sat in silence. No book, no writing, no eye contact, just breathing, as if existence itself had been reduced to breath. A younger inmate sat beside her. Her name was Kayla, early 20s, high ponytail, dark skin, eyes not yet worn out. No greeting, no questions. They sat like shadows beside each other. After a while, Kayla spoke. If you could do it all over again, would you choose differently? The question didn't hit Tameka all at once. It seeped in, slowly, like water into a crack in stone. She looked straight ahead. Her voice was low, steady, like wind brushing through steel wire. If I hadn't wanted more, I wouldn't have betrayed him. If I hadn't needed everything, I wouldn't have sent my husband to prison. If I hadn't slept with his brother, maybe I'd still have a family. Kayla didn't say anything. She just nodded, then stood, walked away, didn't look back. Tameka remained. The light now poured down in gold slivers, not stabbing but slicing, and for the first time in years, she felt something sharp, in a place she thought had long gone numb. Not regret, not grief, but the knowledge that even if she could go back, she might do it all the same. The only difference? She'd smile less. Tameka stayed in the prison long enough to be forgotten by most, but never quite erased. She no longer drew attention, no longer tried to control anything. She wasn't listed among the dangerous ones anymore. But to the new arrivals, the young girls who stepped through those steel doors with wide, frightened eyes, the name Tameka Ellis still drifted in whispers. The woman who made two men disappear, one with the law, one with a bullet. One afternoon, the prison hosted a creative writing class. A young female officer walked to her cell, placed a stack of blank pages in her hands, and said quietly, "If there's something you want to say, write it. Someone will read." Tameka didn't answer, but that night, she sat on the edge of her bed and wrote one line. "Every bit of power I ever had came from believing I wasn't enough." In the years that followed, she taught a few girls how to write, how to be quiet, how not to lash out the moment they were insulted. No one called her by name. They just called her the one who knew how to survive. When someone asked, "Are you afraid of dying?" she said, "I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of living wrong and never realizing it." Tameka Ellis died in prison at 62. No major illness, no pain. Just one morning, the guard opened her cell and found her leaning against the wall, eyes closed, hand still holding a final slip of paper. "Don't be like me, and don't think you couldn't become me." And that's how a woman who once walked through silk, sex, betrayal, blood, and bars ended her life. No redemption, no applause, just remembered exactly as she was.